This is Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. What I wanted to share with you today comes from Edwin. I'm not going to butcher his last name. Uh, Edwin had originally come up about a decade ago, and he was working a cannery, and then he worked a fishing boat, and he kind of worked his way around in the industry. And he ended up in my neck of the woods, back over in Dillingham. He was working for Peter Pan Seafoods, and this was approximately 4 years ago, the year before the COVID crap. So 4 or 5 years ago. So Edwin, along with a couple of Filipino cannery workers that he worked with, one of them had a car that he was borrowing from another friend or what have you. So they decided they're gonna take a trip out and see what Alaska's about. So even though Edwin had been around the industry, he was always out in the water or stuck in a cannery. So having the opportunity to go somewhere like Snake Lake, they were all over it. So from what Edwin said, which there's a little bit of a language barrier, but he was from Poland. His real name isn't Edwin. I can't pronounce it. It's above my pay grade. But anyway, great guy. So what ends up happening? Him and his Filipino friends, they jet out, Aleknagik Road up to Snake Lake Road, and they passed China Cap, and he said they stopped at those gravel pits just off there on the right hand side as you're going back up in there. And he said when they got up on the mountain, they stopped to overlook the vast valley and just the beauty of it, right? And he said one of the Filipino guys, he had a pistol. And so what they decided they were going to do is try to shoot a pond. It's probably 2 miles away, but they were just dicking around with a pistol. And so they're busting shots, and of course they're not hitting anything because of just sheer distance. They weren't going to hit nothing. But after they were done dumping some mags, Edwin said that they heard a weird shrill, like a child screaming. It gives me the chills just thinking about it. Holy shit. Behind them, up above them. He said he wasn't sure how far, but it sounded real close because it sounded like the kid was standing behind them, shrieking, squeal, kind of a... and it shocked all of them. They turned around. They were like, oh, we didn't even know a kid was there. They thought they startled a kid by firing. And so they were turning around to, say sorry or whatever. Nothing was there. Edwin said one of the Filipino guys started pointing up into the woods and started saying something in his home tongue. And he couldn't make out what he was saying. He was telling him to calm down because the guy was getting real worked up. And finally, Edwin said he calmed him down enough to figure out he was saying there's a monster up there, right? And they were thinking, oh, bear, oh, this monster's a bear. Well, Edwin thought it would be a good idea if he walked up a little ways to flush it out because the other guy didn't see it and wanted to see the bear. And the one guy that initially saw this thing was like, no, let's go, let's get in the car, let's go. Because they didn't see, he wasn't explaining to them what had happened. So Edwin, for whatever reason, he took the pistol, reloaded it, and figured, okay, I'm going to scare the bear out, and my buddy will get a look at it. We'll get out of here. He wasn't scared of bears. To each his own. I'm not scared of bears. I'd just rather be prepared for them with something better than a 9mm pistol. But anyway, to each his own. So he goes up in there, and, he's got the pistol, and he's going through all the alders and stuff in the willows. And he's not making any headway, man. He said that he got in there and it was a tangle. It was just trying to push through like a humongous, very strong spider web. And so he backed out and tried to go up a little further and try to, make a way through one of the game trails. But he ended up down on his knees and was like, screw this. He felt very vulnerable, so he backs up. He comes back down the hill and his friends are in the car. And the one guy started blaring on the horn because they didn't see him come down to the backside of the car. And he banged on the trunk to get him to stop honking the horn, right? And they turned around startled and they were shocked. And they were yelling, get in, get in, get in. Well, I'm not laughing at the guy. I'm just mentally picturing these two freaked out dudes in the car saying, get the hell in here, And Edwin's oblivious to what they're doing. He figured, oh, they must have saw the bear. So he's not actually listening to these guys, which he later regrets. He walks in front of the car a little ways and is looking up the hill. what he didn't realize is this thing had come down the hill, crossed in front of these two guys within 25 feet, and just dropped barely down off this side of the road. So he's looking up, and he's basically walking up and turning his back at the very spot where this thing just went down over the rise, right? And so horn blaring again, and he's holding the pistol still, and he's looking back. He's like, telling them stop. He's trying to get a look. He wants to see this bear, and he figured it had to be big if they're scared. And for whatever reason, Edwin, it didn't faze him for whatever reason. He still doesn't understand it. So he walks a little further to see if there's a trail up, better than the one he had just tried. And again, he freely admits he was making one mistake after another. So he sees a spot, and then he notices where there's a footstep. And then he notices, he looks down, he sees another footstep. And so he's like, oh, and he looks at it. And it looks like a big human footprint. And as he's looking down at it, that shrill, childlike scream came from right behind him. And it startled the crap out of him so much he dropped the gun out of just shock. Dropped gun, turns around, and only sees just the top of the head and the eyes from about right here. Just off the road, going down, and because it's the spot they were at was just before it dropped into the sheer drop-offs, a little further up on Snake Lake Road. And so this thing is down, looking up at him, and he's looking across at it, and he's maybe 15 feet away. He said the top of the head looked very round, and the eyes looked almost too small for its head. But in context, the head was huge, and the eyes were beady and pitch black. He said they were pitch black. He saw it blink. He just seeing from just about right here up, and he's trying to figure out what the hell he's seeing, because it's not a bear, and it's still making these weird, kind of a cooing noise and a different types of sounds he ain't never heard before, and it didn't relate to any animal he could pick out, right? Just strange whistles and all sorts of stuff. So Edwin said, as he's staring, horn starts blaring again, and that's what snapped him out of his staring. And he looks over and he's like, "Hey!" And they're literally crawling out of their skin trying to get Edwin to get the hell back in that car. Edwin reaches down, and as soon as he's grabbing the pistol, he hears or he feels thump, thump, and this thing is like less than 4 feet away. Because when he looks back, he sees it, and he looks up, and he said Edwin is 6'2", right? He said he had to look up at it, and he's guessing it had to have been between 10 and 11 foot tall. He said the head was very big and round. The jaw was very wide set. Black hair, very greasy, almost pitch black skin, but it looked gray because of the greasy kind of complexion to it. Beady eyes. No, he couldn't make out any ears. And he's in a compromised position. He's bent over to grab this pistol. The Filipinos in the car lost it. They have lost it. They're both in the back seat, hunkered down low. They want no parts of this, right? And the horn blaring had stopped. Edwin said that part of him wanted to grab the pistol and tell it to get back, and the other part of him, he sensed that he was in serious danger if he did. So he just turned around and faced it, not looking it in its eye. He was trying to examine it, right? He said the torso was abnormally longer than the legs. It seemed like the legs didn't match what should be there for torso. Excuse me. And just the black hair and everything, it kind of obscured everything. It had twigs and stuff in the hair. And he said the smell was putrid, like dead meat with a heavy body odor and urine smell. Very heavy. He said it was very pungent. He said the clothes he was wearing, it didn't touch him or anything, but he was about 4 feet away. The clothes he was wearing stunk like that, even after washing. So it had to have been pretty putrid for that kind of a holdover as far as the smell. I mean, good God. So he doesn't know what to do. He's standing there, and he's not wanting to make eye contact, but this thing isn't moving. It's breathing heavy. He said it was kind of making a gurgling sound as it breathed. and it really, really struck him to his core. He said that he was having an out-of-body experience, but can't. All he could see in his out-of-body experience was looking down over his shoulders, basically just above himself, and still wasn't looking this thing in the eye, right? Which is, I mean, what do you do with that, right? He said he was so scared, he felt like he was having heart palpitations or whatever. He thought he was gonna have a heart attack, and he was a healthy young guy, mid-30s, strong, active, just worked hard, his whole life. So he never had a heart problem, but he was so panic-stricken and worked up. And he said, as he's standing there, he said, "No!" He screamed, "No!" And it kind of it startled this creature, and it took a step back, kind of like a half step back, turned and walked about 10 feet away, and then turned back around and squatted down, looking straight, like it was off the side of the road. When it came up, he initially turned towards it, and then his out of body thing, and then as he starts yelling no, he's kind of turning himself, and this thing turned and walked over into his field of view, turned and squatted down, and was looking right back at him. And it was just kind of doing this number. He said it was very inquisitive looking, and then at that point, because it was further away, he decided to grab the pistol from the ground. He grabbed the pistol and he held it. And he said the thing just looked at him and was just kind of, the expression in his face changed. It went from curious to kind of like, okay, what now? That kind of, this is a feeling he got. Then Edwin said, as soon as he felt confident holding the pistol, he lost it. He lost all confidence and dropped the gun. He said he doesn't know what came over him, but he felt that if he continued to hold that pistol, he was dead. Once he dropped the gun, he bent down and sat Indian style and was looking back at this thing that was squatted down, like 15 feet away. And he said it was massive. He was taking in its size, because once he sat Indian style and this thing was squatted down, he could see its girth, its mass. And even though it seemed kind of skinny when it was standing up, he said you could see every muscle ripple, everything. He said its hand, the thumb was offset further this way, and this thing started like not pawing at the ground, but kind of reaching on the ground and doing something, right? And he couldn't make out what it was doing, but it was doing something specific to it. He couldn't tell if it was trying to write something on the ground. He couldn't tell if it was just like we doodle on paper or something. He couldn't figure it out, because this thing stopped paying attention to him and was doing that thing on the ground. And he said as it was doing that, he was trying to figure out what the hell. And then that's when he snapped out of it again, because his Filipino friends in the car started and the horn blared. Well, that, with the car starting and the horn in unison, this thing, because Edwin turned around to see what the hell, and the car's coming at him, right? So he didn't watch this thing. He didn't watch the creature, but he turned around and basically eased up onto the hood as his friends came at him. And then as soon as he was on the hood, they gunned it. And this thing is, as he looked back, he could already see it going over the edge of the road and dropping down off the side. They went down a little ways, and Edwin was banging, stop, because he was sliding off. He wasn't going to last much longer. They stopped. He got off, and he ran back to where he had dropped the gun. And they're backing up. They're doing a 25-point turnaround, which is, on that road is just absurd. It's, God bless him, He said it was an old Chevette. If you're curious what kind of car, it was an old Chevrolet Chevette. Little short, little four-door, little whatever. He said it was an early 80s model or something like that, 82 or 83. But anyway, so he runs back and grabs the pistol. Well, the pistol had been run over, and it wasn't compromised. It wasn't broke per se, but it was a bit out of operation, right? And so he's got it. He's trying to work the action, and when he jumped up on the hood, they ended up running over the pistol, right? And so what that did was packed a bunch of dirt in between the slide and the frame. and so it was a lot of extra friction, right? And so finally he gets it, pops the round out of it, and starts, took the magazine out. The bottom plate of the magazine was kind of torn off a little bit, but it was still functional, and he's working the slide to get the dirt out of it and stuff. Puts the magazine back in, and as he goes to rack it, the base plate of the mag let go, and all of it just fell out the bottom, right? So he had one round in this 9mm. His friends are behind him, still doing this 20-point turnaround, right? And they're yelling out the window at him all sorts of curse words and, you idiot, what are you doing? All this kind of stuff. And so he said, as he's standing there just trying to take in everything that just happened, because he said it was so surreal, he could not believe that this was actually happening, right? And he said as he was working the action, because he was, at this point, it was just like a nervous tick. He's just working the hell out of that action, just. And as he's doing so, he had emptied the round. The round was on the ground. The other bullets were on the ground. And he was just basically in shock working this action, And I asked him, I was like, well, how long were you like that? What drew you out of it? Did they come back up in the car or something? He goes, no. What had happened is as he's facing off that edge, where he initially saw its head, just its head and its eyes, he was basically at the same spot, maybe a little further away. And he's just working that action, and as he's doing so, he said this thing was right back almost at the same spot, looking at him from the same kind of point of view, right? And so he froze. And as he froze, he said he felt the bumper of the car bump into his leg, and that's what snapped him out of it. And the guys are, looking out the windows, get in. And the guy on the passenger side, he crawled into the back, and he was pointing off the edge. And of course, Edwin was just still looking at this thing, so he understood. He jumps in, and as they take off back down the road, Edwin's trying to look back and get a glance. This thing came back up onto the road and then went right up the mountain, just right on up. He said the initial alders and willows he tried to crawl through were a maze of holy shit, trying to get through there. He said this thing just went like it was nothing, just right on up the mountain, and disappeared out of view because of, the vantage point on the road and the turns and stuff. They ended up getting a flat tire because once they got back down by the gravel pit area, the guy driving kind of got a little squirrely, and the old tires on there, once it kicked sideways, it popped one of the rear tires, right? They did not care, not even a little bit. They continued on down, with the flat tire and all. They got to China Cap, which we called Amok Mountain, which, anyway, I'll leave that alone. Anyway, so they get down to China Cap, only because it's shaped like an old Chinese type style hat. So when they get there, they stop and they're taking a breather, and they start talking to each other like, what the hell? Why were you doing that? And Edwin didn't have an answer. He doesn't know why he was possessed to not flee. Like he said, it was the weirdest thing. He said it almost felt like this thing was drawing him in to its curiosity, not Edwin's. And I asked him, can you flesh that out a little bit? Can you explain that a little better? And he didn't have an explanation. He said he just had the feeling that this thing was drawing him into this thing's curiosity. Like when it went and sat and squatted down, he said he had the strangest feeling like it was trying to tell him something, but he's freaked out. He's worried about the pistol, grabbing the gun. All this stuff is happening. He was expecting it to be a bear, and so it was just a conundrum, right? And he said, but to this day, 4 or 5 years later, to this day, he feels like this thing was trying to communicate something to him on the ground, right? He said the way it wasn't random, just swirling around in the hand. It was like it was doing something with its hand, whether it was writing with its hand or trying to draw something. He didn't know, because he was fucked up, man. There's this monster in front of him, and this weird shit's happening. What do you do with that? So his mind wasn't on everything this creature was doing. It was just happening, And to this day, he said he still thinks that this thing was trying to communicate something. He asked me if I would go back there and check the area. I was like, I'm going to be there at some point, but I don't know about I don't know about that. You know, it's gonna be hard enough to film in the woods back home. But anyway, I want to thank Edwin for sharing. He'll be back to Alaska next year, doing some more fisheries work or cannery work, whichever it may be. I told him, give me a shout. Edwin, you're free to answer the comments if you choose. That's your call. He requested anonymity. You know, I can't pronounce his last name anyway, and his real first name isn't Edwin. He just goes by Edwin. So, your choice, man. You know, I make that choice to everyone who shares with me, and it's up to them. You know, Mark Franks, he jumps into comments and will share. He's not concerned at all about that, and a few others. You know, I'm sure Squatch Bait, you know, he'd jump in on comments if it pertained to him. Let's see, what else was there? I can't remember offhand, but Edwin, hey, thanks for reaching out, dude. I appreciate you being patient on the language barrier. This second person, he didn't get an interpreter from a college like Fritz did in Finland. He got one of his good buddies that is American who happens to be living in Poland at the moment, and got him to relay some of the things, right? Which I appreciate. He has to remain anonymous, so I won't even use his name. I just want to thank him for explaining some of the things I wasn't picking up on. It means a lot when people are willing to pitch in and do that extra, go that extra mile to get things across or whatever. And again, Edwin had a message for everyone. Don't assume they're out to hurt you immediately. They could be trying to communicate with you and you just don't recognize their form of communication. So that's fair. Me personally, I'm biased, so I'll just leave that alone. But to each his own. You know, he says he feels he really missed out on something that could have been like groundbreaking because of what was going on and everything. And them starting up the car and coming at him, it wasn't meant to be. But thank you, Edwin. I appreciate you and your patience. This is like 4 or 5 months in the making, just communication gap, time gap, I don't have international calling, so it was up to him to make the effort, and I appreciate that, dude. And yeah, his one of his comments was Dillingham's a hell of a place. I can't agree more. Dillingham is one hell of a place outside of the small town village bullshit that you get with the social ilks and other shit. In general, it's a beautiful place, and it's definitely different. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, Edwin. I sincerely appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.